All right, and we're live. I'm going to adjust the links on Facebook and 835 on the 805, but we do appear to be streaming finally. That was interesting. And what happens, for those of you who do play with some of this stuff, when I first set up the stream, usually 10 to 15 minutes in advance of actually going live, it always defaults to a virtual camera device that doesn't actually exist. And I manually changed it to the webcam in my MacBook. And that's fine. But if I touch anything else involving that stream or video or edit the name of it or put more information in it, when I go to restart it, even though it says it's defaulted to the MacBook webcam, it somehow picks up the dead camera, the virtual camera again, which I think I just have to find out what that device is and just delete it permanently, and that'll be the end of that. So anyway, sorry for the delay, folks. Let me drop. This is W2NDG on the OMARC Sunday Night Science and Technology Net. We meet here every Sunday night at 8 p.m. I'm usually accompanied by my partner, Jim K2BHM, who helps us look at science and technology. Jim has been away for quite a while, and he'll be back for next Sunday's net. So we'll be getting back to some more scheduled topics that we wanted to go through. Let's get going through the radio spectrum a little bit, but I have a couple other topics that I think Jim would really enjoy being involved in as well. So next Sunday, we'll pick up with that again. Let me drop. Let's pause for any emergency or priority traffic. All right, nothing heard. And I'm going to explain a little what we're going to talk about tonight, and then we'll go right to check-ins. It was one of those heavy yard work days, and I'm a little exhausted from all of it. And we'll go as late as we can manage tonight. But we're going to, I'm still editing some of the posts with the old video link here and putting the new one back in. So please bear with me. Oh, there we go. I have updated the 835 and the 805 as well. All right. So, as a lot of you know, we get together. We talk about science and technology here, not necessarily radio related. And tonight is definitely not a radio related night. If you were on the 6:30 check-in net, I mentioned that we're going to be talking about food. And that's not the subject in general, but I will credit tonight's topic to my son, Alec, who was over here visiting. A couple of you have met him, and some of you may start hearing him on the radio sometime soon. So we were thinking up some things. I thought of a topic while I was outside that I definitely want to save for Jim, and that was thermodynamics. I know that's a word, but it can definitely be pared down to some basic things, and I'm pretty sure Jim would definitely want to be involved in that topic, so we're not going to do that tonight. But Alex's suggestion, based on some things we were talking about at the dinner table and some things that were on the dinner table, is to talk about food preservation, because it's a huge part of technology as far as its effect on society. Food preservation as a general topic has really changed the way we can exist, from the basic idea of having refrigeration to all sorts of things. And because the idea of trying to keep food so that it doesn't go bad W2NDG on the OMARC Sunday Night Science and Technology Net. The idea of keeping food so it doesn't go bad has been around for a very long time and has allowed for the exploration of the world. But as we've changed that technology, it's also allowed us to do a lot more things as far as how we survive, how we live, and not having to go to the market every day to get something fresh. So let's discuss that. And I'm going to name some preservation methods here, and then we'll go for check-ins. And when we do go around and talk to everybody, I want you to, comment on some of these, but think of something I've missed. So let me pause. I think we'll take check-ins first, and then we can start asking people questions about this stuff. Some of it's pretty cool. A lot of us get involved in some of these things. You may not think of it as food preservation, but we definitely do stuff that's on these lists, and everybody has their favorite way of doing this or doing that. So let's drop and take some check-ins. If you want to check into the OMARC Sunday Night Science and Technology Net, you do that by giving me your call sign, your first name, and your location. You do not need to be a member of this club to check in and participate. So if you're here, please come now. Call sign, first name, and location.
Here is K9GPT John Hobo Junction. Here is T2 GOG Steve Poughkeepsie. This was BYQ Paul. Here is KB2 GGF Matt in Kerhunction.
This is WA2 RKN Jerry Mike Farth.
Yeah, all right. Thanks for checking in, folks. And we have John K9JPT, Steve K2GOG, Paul N3EYQ, Matt KB2GGF, and Jerry WA2RKN. Anybody else want to check in tonight? Please come now.
This is KD2BAH Jim Poughkeepsie, just 8.
All right. Thank you, Jim. All right. I made a quick list of some things, and some of these are related. And I know some of them may actually be the same method, just talked about differently. But so let's not nitpick tonight. But I'm going to list some of these, and I'll ask some basic questions first, and then we can go around and just talk about it. But some people may not think this is a big deal, but without this stuff, there's so much that could never have been accomplished and couldn't be accomplished today. And we take a lot of it for granted. So right off the bat, freezing and refrigeration, drying, salting, smoking, pickling, which is directly related to something called corning, preserving and canning. And preserving is kind of a generic word, but I mean preserving, making preserves, and soaking things in alcohol. Doesn't work with us, though. We don't tend to preserve ourselves when we do that. It kind of has the opposite effect. Anyway, and that's just some basic stuff. And we go back to really the old days of travel and exploration. They didn't have a lot of choices. It wasn't like they were going to pack the Yeti coolers or get one of these Porta-Pack, solid state cooling devices, or any of these things that we have today. So what did they do? And I'll ask for a shout out. What was one of the most common methods of preservation for, let's say, when Columbus took his ships to what he thought was India? Anybody can just throw their call sign out and answer this. What were some of the ancient ways of preserving food that were common on something like Columbus's expedition?
K9JPT. KB2GGF.
All right, John first.
Salting.
Excellent. And there's probably one other really common one, Matt.
Fermentation.
Anybody have another?
K9JPT.
That was a double. All right, I heard John and Paul. Let me give Paul a shot. John, you already answered one.
Well, it makes sense, like drying, like beef jerky and smoking. They're all kind of related.
Yeah, drying is what I was thinking of. Basically, grains and beans, along those lines. But yeah, I mean, you'd pack up a ship, and salt was the way they preserved meat, and some other things like butter. They would just put so much salt in it that it wouldn't go bad. It was, I imagine probably, not the easiest thing in the world to eat, but it was that or not live. Using alcohol to preserve things, definitely, and drying. They'd have to, soak things or whatever to reconstitute them before they could even be cooked, like beans. But that got us pretty far. It's you weren't always going to have food where you were going. It was different, I think, for exploration on foot or by wagons or by horse. They could hunt, they could forage. Not always, but yeah, those are some really early methods of this. And it really wasn't until some of these other methods came into being. Now, smoking is not probably quite as old a method as the rest of them, but it did come into play. And it's related to salting and pickling / curing / Matt, what's the word you used? I'm tired.
Fermentation, the involvement of bacteria.
Correct. Yeah. Some incredible Korean soul invented kimchi. There's definitely a lot on this list like that, but other things came later. And one of the most important inventions here was refrigeration. Drying evolved into more sophisticated methods, dehydrating, freeze drying, things like that. Pickling, of course, has evolved to be, a whole process, science, culture. But yeah, obviously, without any of these, you wouldn't be able to, go shopping once a week for groceries like a lot of us do, or any of these other things. So I don't know. Other than freezing, or even if you are doing some freezing at home and you have some crazy method you like to use for it, because I know I'm about to freeze some stuff, and there's a certain way I like to go about it. What are you doing at home, if anything? What do you enjoy doing? Do you get into any of this? Because there was a point in life where it was all necessary to survive, but now we kind of do it as a culinary activity or experimentation or hobby stuff. So, is there anything on this list you like to do? Is there anything we left off the list? John, K9JPT, what are your comments on this?
No, it's a very interesting topic. I think that as a Scandinavian, though, we know that smoking fish and meat has been a long traditional cultural endeavor that Scandinavians do with fish and salmon and that sort of thing. And also, the meat that you get from moose. But I also think that freeze-dried is more maybe particular to the space industry. They have a lot of freeze-dried food that goes up to space just because it's lightweight. And one of the amazing things that I saw this summer when I was up in Lisbon, New York for the 4th of July, I visited a Amish homestead, and they actually showed me the ice house where during the previous winter they would go out in the ice and cut huge blocks, and then it gets packed in sawdust. And that's how they keep their milk and everything and vegetables cool. They put it in this house that's packed with sawdust and keeps everything nice and fresh. So that's very interesting. And even again in Scandinavia, they use a lot of what they call cool cellars that are cellars built into the ground, and people keep a lot of things in there like potatoes and vegetables and beer and stuff like that. Back to that K9JPT.
Thanks, John. Good topic. In any community, when you look into the history of that place, there will frequently be talk of the ice house and the whole process of that. And I know with Kingston, it's definitely something that I know where it was, where they used to pull the ice from. You see that come up in some of the Kingston history at times, and even on Facebook, pictures of it on the one Kingston history page. But yeah, it's, you put enough ice in one location and it can survive some pretty crazy weather. If you don't believe me, those of you who have been up to Ice Caves Mountain, which is now part of the whole Shawangunk State Park network there. But when it was, I haven't been there, I think, since it was a private preserve park. And one of the things where it got its name was the ice cave itself. And, in the middle of August, you'd go down into this cave and there was still ice in it. It's definitely possible. It's definitely doable. And it's nice to know that there are cultures that are still doing it. But, oh, God, it's so much easier to open that refrigerator door, isn't it? All right. Paul, N3EYQ, you're up next.
How about refrigerators, railroad cars? Basically, a big icebox on wheels. I read something a while back about a little bit of history about all that, and how the beer industry kind of spearheaded the refrigeration of that to move their product across the country. N3EYQ.
Well, it's frequently, more frequently than not, vices that drive technology. We can have a whole discussion on that. It's a good point. Refrigeration is a big business, and when they figured out how to use gas condensation, expansion and contraction to make things cold. It was a huge thing, and early on they did this with electricity, but also, and they can still do it this way, but it's just not seen as much. You can do it with gas, propane, natural gas. You can have refrigeration that operates with that, And those of us who have campers know about it because they tell you have the three-way fridge, operates AC, DC, and propane. You don't see it as much in homes. Definitely, not something that survived the times, but yeah, it's definitely a way to do it. Now, there are other ways to create refrigeration without, the normal refrigerant means that we know. There's also solid state refrigeration, not as efficient, but it uses the Peltier device, which is a bimetallic device that when you apply voltage to it, one side gets hot, one side gets cold, and basically turning it to a little heat pump. And taking that and hooking it up to heat sinks and airflow the proper way, you can actually create refrigeration, and also you can reverse it and create some mild warming effects also. It does. When you start talking about stuff like that, it leads into the whole thermodynamics thing. Let me drop. I won't get deep into that tonight. That's for another night. But basically, it's the reminding yourself that, like when you run an air conditioner, you're not blowing cold air into your house, but technically you're pumping heat out of your house. You just have to think of it in those terms. But that's what refrigeration is. So, any of you have those Peltier coolers? They're neat. I have one I've had for probably more than 2 decades. And it works great. I have to change out the fan in it, but it's a good size one that we bring on trips, and it keeps everything cold. As long as you pre-cool it for about half a day at least. It works. All right. Matt, KB2GGF, you're up next.
As I mentioned, fermentation, as a preservation method, not only cabbage and other greens, but also fermentation to an extent applies to cheese making, which was another thing that they did to preserve food. But I've done a little bit of pickling and done some fermented pickles, and I've brewed beer and made yeasted breads. So, a bit of fermentation going on there. Some of them preservable, some not. Beer obviously is preserved and was a great benefit in earlier times in Europe. The monasteries all started brewing beer because it was safe to drink, unlike some local well water. So it was a preservation of water in a way. So that's all I'm thinking about right now. So back to Ned, KB2GGF.
Yeah, good stuff, Matt. And cheese making. And a lot of things like cheese making, pasta, which is really a preserved bread, really bread product. A lot of things, and so many things like this were discovered by accident. Cheese making, and a lot of this is it's legend, but it's definitely believable legend. Cheese making, of course, being that because we wasted nothing from the animals that we used for food. And someone decided once to try to store milk in an animal stomach, and discovered what happened. Pasta, the legend there was from China. It was a woman who ruined a batch of dough, and it dried up, and she didn't know what to do with it, so she put it in the soup because she would have gotten in trouble for wasting it. And pasta was invented, at least reconstituted pasta. But yeah, there's definitely more that can be expanded on there. Thanks, Matt. You added a few things to my brain here. I skipped somebody, and I don't know how, because you're written on my list, and for some reason I just went right over it. But Steve, K2GOG, you're up next. Sorry about that. Steve, K2GOG, are you there? I hope you didn't drop off because I accidentally skipped you. All right. Well, we'll try Steve again at the end. And once again, Steve, sorry if I threw a couple in there before you, but was not intentional. All right, Jerry, WA2RKN, you're up next.
Okay. I hope I'm not going to derail the discussion here, but maybe a little skewed point of view. Food preservation, has allowed us to do things like, sail the Atlantic, stumble across this continent. Right now, we're using the food preservation technology to feed some people on the International Space Station. They're doing experiments, or some experiments, or have done, about growing food up there. But by extension, let's take this to some place where it's not easy to resupply, like on the moon, or maybe Mars. What kind of food are you going to be eating there? I mean, you're not going to be eating a prime rib steak. Think about this now. If you're going to be setting up colonies someplace or a permanent base, you're going to want a long-term supply of food. Yeah, gardening and, hydroponics, grow the lettuce and whatever. But you're not going to be eating beef. What are you going to be eating? Well, maybe fish, in combination with the hydroponics. What else might you be eating? Chickens, perhaps. But I don't think it's going to get any higher up the food chain than that. There may be algae. There's already been work on 3D printing meats, lab-grown meat. Where are we going from here? Where is our food technology going to take us? How are we going to sustain ourselves on these further hostile environments? WA2RKN, back to that.
Jerry, it's a great subject, and it's a conversation I had with a guy who used to run one of the more famous tech nets. Dick Nadel used to run the tech net on Limemark, Long Island, ran that net for many, 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 many years on Sunday nights. And Dick once, after there was a very heavily watched and talked about program on Mars exploration that had been on, and he felt that was one of the obstacles to it ever actually happening, was that we really didn't have a way to feed people. And he was talking about kind of the same thing, that you couldn't bring chickens, or there were all these different ways of looking at it. You couldn't produce enough food in space. To which I said, it's because you're thinking about it through current means. In other words, you're looking at food from the point of view that you get it now. And you mentioned, like we were talking about last weekend, the sewing machine analogy, where they couldn't invent the sewing machine until they changed their way of thinking about it. It wasn't a machine that was sewing like a person would sew with their hands. They had to think about it differently. And you have to do the same thing with, I think, food for space. Let me drop. Yes, 3D printing. Great technology. I think there's going to be other terms that are going to come out of this type of technology. We're not going to call it 3D printing, as when we start branching off into different types of synthesis. There's a good word. I think we're going to see some more terminology coming out of this, but that is basically what you're looking at, is taking the basic nutritional building blocks that people need to survive and turning it into something that can be consumed. If they can make it palatable along the way, great. If they can simulate a type of food that people really want to eat or enjoy eating, fantastic. And like you were saying, yes, they can 3D print things like meat. Well, yeah, synthesizing of food. And this is something that's, you know, people are probably in no hurry to run down to the store and buy a synthesized steak. But um, for purposes of exploration and travel like that, yes, definitely. Because people are already, eating things in space that are not necessarily something that they're going to order at Morton's in New York City. Let me drop again. So when you're looking at the basic building blocks, those can be obtained through things like algae, as you said. And one of the cool things about algae um, and hydroponics and fish, as you're talking about this, is that they can all exist in a symbiotic relationship along with something that's also going to help with passive heat retention for passive solar and other methods like that. So if we were going to build a base on Mars, what if we were to put big tanks in it that had algae, fish, and maybe some other type of aquatic plant that could produce protein? And if you processed that algae, which would probably be developed just for this, and the fish into their basic proteins and carbohydrates and fats, you could synthesize food. You might have to bring some vitamin and mineral supplements along to add to these things, but you could definitely engineer the algae and the fish to cover most of the bases. So, how's that sound, Jerry?
I think we both overlooked an obvious one here too: insects. Yeah, not my favorite, but I can't deny that a lot of people in the world like them, and it seems to be easy protein. I'm squeamish. Yep. I'm also not living on Mars, so I get to be choosy. It'll be way too arcane.
No, it's a great point. And yeah, and we are squeamish about that. We are. But if you could process them into something else, because it's going to take generations to get over that. It really is. But yeah, I mean, when you come down to it, how much different is a grasshopper from a shrimp? Really? Really? Things like that. But yeah, you can definitely produce insects at a very high density. Um, and there are insects that can be produced in harsh environments. And there's certainly, you could produce a high volume of insects in a small area that would be very high in protein. Yeah, I mean, that could work. There's a lot of different ways to do this here, but I think that is the answer. As far as getting people, okay with eating synthesized food, Burger King's selling a lot of those Impossible Whoppers. So it'll work somewhere along the line. We got a lot of people to feed. KD2 VAH, Jim, you're up next.
All I remember is somebody says something about drinking alcohol doesn't preserve your body. I think the jury's still out on that one. All right? I mean, anytime during the day you walk down the middle of Main Street and see lots of old drunks. You don't see no young drunks. Anyway, now, do you ever eat those MREs? You want to talk about meal preservation? They're really not that bad, especially the new modern ones. I'm not talking about C rations or K rations.
No, and they can be okay. I've done backpacking food, freeze dried stuff, Um, and if done correctly, it can be okay, but that's definitely more of a, I need to eat this or I'll die type of food. But yeah, they're not bad. But no, yeah, as much as we joke about it, yeah, alcohol overall, the statistics would say that it definitely does not increase your lifespan if you're drinking enough of it to compare what it's doing to you to fermenting of food or pickling. Yeah, you want to have a drink after dinner every night for your entire life, one drink, that might actually help you. There's been studies on that. All right. Steve, K2GOG, I'm going to throw out to you again. I'm sorry I missed you the first time around there. Like I said, not sure what happened, but Steve, if you're there, please come down. All right, we'll have to send Steve a bag of pickled and smoked meats. But I hope I didn't offend him by skipping him. I feel bad. It's just because I am exhausted. Oh, by the way, a very dense source of insects is my wood pile. How do I know this? Whew, that was an interesting job today. So, anyway, all right. So we got some good stuff going here, and Matt, thank you for reminding me of things like cheese, because we forget that really was a way of preserving dairy products. Yogurt, another one that was probably found by accident. It's like, oh, this milk went bad. Oh, it's actually edible and it's not bad and it didn't kill me. There's stuff like that. The legend from Roquefort, France, by the way, let me drop, was that a young couple um, that had snuck off from the village to the caves in Roquefort, where they make the cheese, had accidentally left a piece of the mild cheese they were making in the village and a slice of bread laying in the cave while they were doing whatever. And when they realized that they had left the food, because once again, you could really get in trouble for wasting things, they went back to get it the next day and they discovered that the cheese had somehow picked up mold from the bread, but it was wonderful. And that's where they make Roquefort cheese, in these caves near Roquefort, France. Who knows if any of this is true, but I think so many things about food were discovered by accident. So, all right, back up to the top. No, actually, let's see if we have any more check-ins here. Is there anybody else who'd like to get in on our delicious discussion tonight, unless you're talking about the insects? On the OMARC Sunday Night Science and Technology Net. I'm Neil, W2NDG, on the OMARC 805 repeater. And if you'd like to check in and participate, please come now with your call sign, your name, and your location. All right, nothing heard. So we will roll back up to the top to John, K9JPT. And I think we'll make one more trip through the names here, and then we'll sign for tonight. So this will be our final round before open discussion and ending the video. So John, come now.
Thanks, Neil. No, it's been very interesting to hear all the different things that people have to say, and I found that I've been finding everything very interesting. So I don't have anything to add right now, but yeah, it's been really interesting, that's for sure. And maybe one of these methods that have been discussed, I need to try myself and see how I like food prepared that way, especially salty meat. Internet, K9KPT.
All right, John. And I didn't mention any of the things that I've done on here, other than freezing, which I said I was going to talk about and didn't. I've done some drying. The mint in my front yard got dried recently, but I've done a couple of other things like that. Peppers. Never made beef jerky. That'd be something to do at some point. Smoking. I haven't done smoking necessarily to preserve meat. That's another one of those things that's evolved, like we say. Um, we do smoking because we like smoked meats. And one of the first things I ever attempted to do that with myself was a big piece of salmon on a Weber kettle grill using indirect heat and some smoking chips, and came out pretty good. But I've done it with a number of other meats, but I don't have a smoker, so to speak. I just use my regular grill, so I'm not really smoking. Pickling. I have done some basic pickling. I've made fruit preserves, and some of you heard that story because of the blackberry bush in the front yard here. But I also made grape preserves years ago, so I've done that. Canning. I have done a little bit of canning. I mostly was some tomatoes, and my ex would do pickled eggs and beets, and I would help her out with that. And that's really where I learned how to do this. And that's really about it. There's certainly a lot of stuff we do from a culinary point of view. So I've made yogurt, and I have made cheese. So for those things that Matt brought up, and I have not eaten any insects intentionally. You've all read those statistics about how many spiders we accidentally consume in our lifetime. Ugh, we don't want to think about that. But yeah, I'll hit on the freezing thing after we get going here. All right, so this is where Steve should have been in the original round. So Steve K2GOG, we'll try you again here. Are you around? All right, now we've lost Steve. So, all right, Paul, N3EYQ, final round. Anything else you want to add?
I don't know. Maybe replicators. Sounds like Star Trek. It's probably the way to go. N3UIQ.
It's funny you should mention that, because that was, when I first started talking about food synthesis on that other net years ago. That's what, someone called me out on. It's like, well, you're talking about Star Trek stuff, and I'm like, no, I'm not. We had just had this guy in speaking at Sloan Kettering who was 3D printing drugs, because you can use that technology down to the molecular level. And yeah, when you really think about it, are we getting, that much different than the food replicators in Star Trek? No, not really. We're getting there. I don't know. We'll see how it goes. All right, thanks, Paul. Matt, KB2GGF.
Well, it all sounds sort of Dr. Strangelove in a way, to be maximizing possible protein. But I suppose that's what you have to do if you're going to some place where you can't live otherwise. But I sure don't want to go to Mars if all they have is Dannon cockroach flavor yogurt. This wouldn't be good, man. But it's interesting stuff. I don't know how the people would feed themselves going there. But one of the reasons why I'm not going. So back to that, KB2GGF.
No. Dannon cockroach flavored yogurt. Breyer's caramel grasshopper. Kind of brings a new definition to that. Anyway, yeah, and Jerry hit the nail on the head. We're squeamish about that. Yeah, I have no problem admitting I'm squeamish about that. Some people, are more squeamish than others. I can eat a lot of things. There's very little food-wise that I'm afraid of as far as run-of-the-mill, food. I think the one thing that I always said that I needed a few glasses of wine in me to eat was snails. But once again, with a few glasses of wine, I did. But yeah, like I said, it's going to take a couple of generations to get over that. All right, Jerry, WA2RKN, you're up next.
Well, we could just put another link in the chain there, producing this stuff. We both know we can crank out the protein at an insect level, but maybe instead of consuming it directly because of the psychological impact, we could use that insect protein to feed maybe rabbits or rats. Well, see, rats, now that'd be another psychological barrier, I suppose. Rabbits would be a candidate, perhaps. Off the top of my head, I can't think of anything else that would be suitable for something like this. But chickens, rabbits, I don't know. Farmers probably would have a better idea about this. WA2RKN, back to net.
Well, the trick is, high density food production. And the question is, are we producing food to be consumed, or are we producing raw materials? And that's what I think. I think for something like this, I think we're thinking more about producing raw materials, which the insects may work out really, really well for. What you're saying is, no, not consuming insects directly. But I think because they can be produced in a relatively small area with much less resource than trying to bring chickens into space, they would take the insects and feed them into machinery that would use the proteins and fats and everything that were the basic building blocks of food. So it's still going to gross some people out. But I think that's what we're looking at. I think we're looking at those basic building blocks. Algae, insects, anything else that fits that description. And fish would be the special dinner. Pull some of them out of that tank that everything else is in. So I keep thinking about this because this is something that happens where I work. One of the animals that is used for research, in cancer research, are zebrafish. I'm not saying that we should eat zebrafish, but zebrafish have to eat something. And we produce in tanks high amounts of brine shrimp, which is a very concentrated food source for the fish. And of course, those of you who aren't familiar with the term brine shrimp, sea monkeys, maybe that's something you're more familiar with. But yeah. Let me throw it back to you, Jerry, again, real quick, because you definitely hit on a part of this topic I think that is really fascinating.
Yeah, I had another thought here, but it was fleeting. Preceding the sea monkeys kind of thing. Well, whatever. I can't think of it right now. WA2RKN, back to that.
That's all right, Jerry. And last up would be Jim, KD2VAH. Any parting thoughts before we close things up tonight?
Don't really have any. No, back to net.
You're fine as long as there's still coffee where we're going, right?
Exactly, brother. Absolutely.
Even if it's made from the carcasses of dried mayflies.
Coffee is coffee. Sometimes it's good coffee, sometimes it's bad coffee, but it's still coffee.
One of my favorite memes, pictures that I've shared over the years, shows a coffee plant, and it says, "This is a coffee plant," and it says an arrow, and it said, "Coffee is made from the coffee bean," and it has an arrow pointing to the bean. And there's another arrow that says, "Decaf coffee is made from the dirt."
Yeah, I've got a saying about that same thing, coffee and decaf, but it's not arable.
Yeah, that's okay. But that's one of my favorites. So, all right. Thanks, Jim. And let's see if there's any last minute check-ins for the OMARC Sunday Night Science and Technology Net before we close things up tonight. All right. Now, special thanks to everybody who came on tonight and made it an interesting topic. And special thanks to my son, Alec, who, even though he's not on here with a call sign yet, came up with a good topic tonight, because I was looking for something that wouldn't draw us into a 2-hour discussion, but was interesting. And it is. We don't think about it too much. I did tell you I was going to tell you how I froze food. Just my own, cheat to make things work better. Let me drop. But when I go berry picking or anything like that, as long as the type of food is conducive to this type of freezing, and a lot of things are, I take a big cookie sheet and I lay some wax paper out on it. Usually you can use foil too, but sometimes you might want to spread some vegetable oil on the foil so things don't stick. And I have a chest freezer. So I have a place that I can do this, which is good. And I just lay everything out on the cookie sheet so it's separate and freeze it that way. I've done this with homemade dumplings and pierogies, but it's great for things like berries. And I have a whole bunch of hot peppers that my next door neighbor gave me. I'm going to freeze those same way. And that way you're freezing everything separate. It also freezes fast. So you put that stuff in the next morning. If you want to do it overnight, everything's going to be all frozen and all separated. So really handy. And then I take whatever it is off the cookie sheet and just dump it into Ziploc freezer bags or freezer containers. If it's something you want to, deal with portions, then I usually double bag. And like with strawberries, put like small Ziploc bags inside of larger Ziploc bags, whatever. It's just things last longer that way because they're double bagged and you're not opening everything up just to get a handful out. So, but yeah, modern freezing. And the colder things are, the longer they last. Trust me on this. Anyway, that's it for tonight on the OMARC Sunday Night Science and Technology Net. You meet here every Sunday night at 8 p.m. to talk about science and technology. And this repeater that we are talking on, the 146-805 repeater, is brought to you by the Overlook Mountain Amateur Radio Club, or OMARC. You do not need to be a member to participate in this event or any of the other ones held on this frequency. But we welcome you. If you're listening tonight and want to check us out, please check us out at omarcclub.org, omarcclub.org, and see what you can do to participate more or possibly become a member. And if you do that, you might want to join some of our other nets. Every morning at 8:35 a.m. is the 8:35 on the 805, a roundtable, relaxed net where everybody talks about what's going on in their lives and how things are going. It was started at the beginning of the COVID pandemic to get people to communicate and make sure that everybody was okay and staying social. It's a great little way for everybody to come together, and it was a big help to a lot of people just who needed that type of interaction when we were all kind of stuck at home. Every night at 6:30 p.m. is the 6:30 check-in net, similar to the 8:35 net, but a little more formal, with directed by a net controller, but still very casual, laid back, and basically people talking about what's going on in their day-to-day and whether they need anything. Let me drop. Every Tuesday, I believe at 8 p.m., and someone can correct me, is the Undernet, or the Ulster and Northern Duchess Readiness Net. This is practice for emergency communications, eventually leading up to a full Aries and Races involvement, hopefully. Usually run either by Brad, Steve, or Ken. Lately, they've been doing a lot of experimenting with slow scan TV over VHF, which is kind of cool because all you need is a cell phone and a cheap VHF two-way radio to make it work. Let me drop. Every Thursday night at 8 p.m., Dave, K2JLV, hosts the Thursday Night Technical Net. TechNet, usually related to ham radio, but almost always related to technology, meaning ham radio, computers, and other things that are directly or indirectly related to ham radio. Dave usually takes check-ins, asks if anybody has a general question or troubleshooting problem for the group, and if something doesn't come up after the first check-in round, Dave spins the topic wheel and picks a topic for us. A lot of fun. A lot of problems and troubleshooting taken care of on that net. So please join us for all these nets right here on OMARC 146805, negative shift, PL tone 103.5. And this is Neil, W2NDG, ending tonight's OMARC Sunday Night Science and Technology Net. We'll be back here next weekend at 8 p.m., hopefully with Jim, K2BHM, returning. And he can tell us all about the science and technology he experienced on his vacation, if any. And we'll see everybody here next week. I'm going to end the YouTube stream now. And as usual, I'll hang out for 5 or 10 minutes if anybody wants to chat. Everybody have a good night.